Well, good morning, everybody. How you guys doing? It is good to be with you this morning. We're kicking off a brand new teaching series we're calling I Am. And over the next 7 weeks, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be walking through the Gospel of John, which is one of the 4 books known as the Gospel that teaches about the life and the ministry of Jesus. And specifically, we're going to be looking at 7 statements about Jesus, about what he says or who he says he is. And so I'm really, really excited about this series. Also, as a part of this series, we're going to be trying something new. And as a church, we really are committed to just constantly, what is something we can do, anything that helps people find and follow Jesus. You heard it in the video, you heard Adrian say it, it's what we're about. How do we help people grow closer in their relationship with Jesus? And to that end, we recognize how important it is for all of us who have placed our lives in Christ to have time with him each and every day. And a huge part of that is not just time with him, but time in his word. And we recognize that for a lot of us, we might already have something in place. We might already have kind of a daily devotional time. We might already have a reading plan. But for others of us, it's kind of overwhelming. Like, how do I start? Where do I start? What do I read? What's right? What's wrong? And like we can almost get like caught up in the amount of options. And so we actually allow that to prevent us from spending time in God's word, spending time with God each and every day. And so to that end, we're going to be launching through this series a new resource we're calling Daily Bible Reading. And every single day or 5 days a week throughout this series, we're going to be putting out a resource for you guys that helps you engage with the text, helps you kind of process through some questions about what God's word says, and then ultimately take God's word and apply it to your life. And everything in the Daily Bible Reading Plan is built upon what we're talking about on the weekend. So basically, it expands the conversation and helps you engage with God in throughout your week. And so if that resource is something that you're interested in, there's 2 ways you can access it. You can go online to lakesawyerchurch.org, and under the connect button, you can just scroll down. The second thing down there says Daily Bible Reading. You can click on that, and you can access all 5 days there. Or if you have the Lake Sawyer Church app, if you don't have the church app, I'd encourage you to download it. But right there on the homepage, if you scroll down to the bottom, you can click Daily Bible Reading, and you can begin engaging with the text there and begin to develop this quiet time, this time in God's word in your life on a daily basis. This morning, as we jump into this series, as we jump into the first of the 7 statements that Jesus says about himself, we're going to join with the story in the Gospel of John in chapter 6, beginning in verse 35. And this is what Jesus says in verse 35. Jesus declares, "I am the bread of life. Whoever comes to me will never go hungry, and whoever believes in me will never be thirsty." Our culture is fascinated with food. Like, we have a foodie culture. Like, this is probably a bad illustration, but like, I have a dog at home, and that dog eats the same food every single day. Twice a day, it eats the same food. We're bad food, our dog owners. We don't feed our dog anything else other than his dog food. And I think to myself, if I had to eat the same meal every single day, twice a day, I think I would rather just not be alive. Like, we are a culture that loves food, and there's no judgment because, again, I'm a part of that culture. I love to enjoy all types of different cuisine. Food is tasty. Food fills our stomach. I like food, but I have to tell you, I've kind of developed a bad habit during this COVID season, and my guess is I'm probably not the only one who's developed this habit. I think they call it COVID-19 because we gained 19 pounds in this season, but I've developed the habit of late night snacking. Now, there's something different between late night snacking and snacking during the day. Like, when you snack in the day, you're snacking for sustenance. Like, I'm gonna eat some of these almonds to help get me through because I'm feeling a little rundown, or I'm gonna have some fruit. I'm gonna eat some fresh fruit, some natural, energy to kind of get me through my next meeting. Like, we're thinking sustenance when it comes to daytime snacking, but when it comes to nighttime snacking, it's all about satisfaction. We're trying to satisfy some craving we have, and it's usually, I want something sweet, or I want something salty, or I want something savory, or I want some combination. So I want like sweet and salty, or savory and sweet, or savory and salty. And like, we got these like things, these ideas in our mind, like, this is what I need, and if I get this, then I'm gonna feel satisfied. And I'm like the worst at this. My wife would attest to it. Like, it could be like 10:30 at night, and I'm like, I need chips. Like right now, if I could have some chips and salsa, like that would satisfy this hunger that I have. It would make me feel full. And so I'll go like 10:30 at night, I'll get chips and salsa and I'll start eating it, which is not really a good idea to eat something like spicy right before you go to bed, but I'm not a smart person. And then I'll finish it, and you know what happens? It just doesn't satisfy me. It's like not what I was looking for. Can anyone else relate to this? Okay, right? So then I'll go and I'll be like, some Oreos and milk, because like that's what I need. And so I'll go and I'll eat, a dozen or two Oreos, something around there. I can't count that high. So I'll eat the Oreos, and then I'll finish up the Oreos, and I'll be like, no, like my wife hates this. I don't like the lingering like taste of sweet in my mouth. And so I'm like, I can't finish with Oreos. So then I'll go and I'll get like bread, I'll toast bread and put some butter on it. And at this point, I've literally consumed 2,000 calories trying to satisfy my desire. But we do this. Like we turn to food to find fullness and to find satisfaction in what we crave in life. And here's what I want us to understand. Even though Jesus is talking about food in John 6:35, what Jesus is talking about is about so much more than just food. Now, to understand what Jesus is really talking about, we have to step back. We have to join with where the story begins in chapter 6. And if you've been in and around church for any period of time, you're probably familiar with this story. It's one of those famous Bible stories that we're going to start our journey with together. At this point in Jesus' ministry, large crowds of people have come. Large crowds of people, they gather around Jesus. They want to see what Jesus might do, what miracle he might perform. They want to witness whatever it is that he might say. Like, I want to learn from Jesus. And so crowds have gathered. And as we join here in chapter 6, this crowd has been journeying with Jesus throughout the whole day, and Jesus recognizes some level of responsibility that he has to help feed the crowd. And so we're told that he turns to Philip. Philip is one of his disciples, and he says to Philip, hey, can we go out and buy bread to feed all these people? Like, they've been with us all day, they're hungry, they're thirsty. Can we go out and buy some bread so that we can feed these people? Now, immediately, Philip begins doing the math. How much it's going to cost per loaf at the local convenience store? Thousands of people in the crowd. And what he realizes, it's going to take roughly a half year's wage to feed the crowd. Now, for context's sake, the median household, or the median income for people in the United States in 2020 was $51,000. So a half year's wage is $25,500. So I want you to put yourself in Philip's shoes. Jesus says, hey, let's go buy some bread. And immediately you start looking around and you realize it's going to cost me $25,000 to go buy some bread to feed this crowd. My guess is you're going to do what the disciples do. You start to think through alternatives. Like, there's got to be a better way. Like, we can't just go out right now and spend $25,000. Verse 8, another of his disciples, Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, spoke up. He said, look, here is a boy with 5 small barley loaves and 2 small fish, but how far will they go among so many? See, Andrew has a different idea. A different idea than spending a half year's wage. But even Andrew seems to recognize the flaws in his plan. He recognizes the problem that there's only 5 loaves of bread, only 2 small fish. Like, how will this feed everybody? Now, this might be a problem for the disciples, but for Jesus, it was all that he needed. The text tells us that Jesus gave thanks to God. He multiplied the food. He fed the crowd, and everyone ate until they were full. Everyone is satisfied. And as the day comes to an end, we're told that Jesus leaves the crowd. Jesus retreats up on a mountainside to spend some time alone, to spend some time with the Father. And as Jesus is up in the hills, the disciples decide they're going to get into a boat and they're going to set out in that boat on the Sea of Galilee. And along the way, the waves pick up, the winds start howling. The disciples are terrified. And the text tells us that Jesus made his way out to the disciples by walking on water. When he gets to the disciples, he calms the storm, he calms the wind, he calms the waves. He eases the disciples' concerns, their fears, and he ultimately gets in the boat. And collectively, they make their way to Capernaum. And then we read this in verse 22. The next day, the crowd that had stayed, the crowd that Jesus fed, the crowd that stayed on the opposite shore of the lake realized that only one boat had been there, and that Jesus had not entered it with his disciples, but they had gone away alone. The crowd stays put. I imagine the crowd is anxiously awaiting Jesus' return. They know the disciples have left. They watched the disciples leave, but they also know that Jesus wasn't in that boat and that there was only one boat. So that means Jesus must still be up on the mountainside. And so surely enough, Jesus is going to come down from the mountainside. Surely enough, Jesus is going to come, and when he comes with him, he's going to bring their next meal. Now, maybe you're thinking, well, how do we know that? Like, how do we know that's what the crowd was thinking? How do we know that they were only concerned with where their next meal was going to come from? Maybe the crowd is there because they're just that into Jesus. Maybe the crowd is there because, again, they want to see a miracle he's going to perform. They want to be a part of anything he might say or do. How do we know that all they care about is where their next meal comes from? We know that because of what we read beginning in verse 23. Then some boats from Tiberias landed near the place where the people had eaten the bread after the Lord had given thanks. Once the crowd realized that neither Jesus nor his disciples were there, they got into the boats and went to Capernaum in search of Jesus. Now, obviously, there's a little bit of mystery as to what transpired here in this interaction, but many scholars believe that at this point in Jesus' ministry, in Jesus' life, he's become quite the attraction. Like, he's kind of a pretty popular dude at this point in his ministry. Like, people, like we see, they show up by the thousands to be a part of what he is doing. And so here comes this group of men with boats who were telling, hey, look, Jesus is not here. I have a boat. I can take you to where Jesus is. I can transport the crowd back to the main event. And make no mistake about it, this is a way to make money. Like, these people are like, this crowd wants Jesus. Jesus is gone. I know where Jesus is. So, hey, let's get into my boats, and I'm going to take you to where you can find Jesus. Eventually, they get into the boats. They head to the other side of the lake, and it's there that they find Jesus. Not up on the hillside, but on the other side of the lake. And immediately, they start engaging Jesus in conversation. Essentially, what they're doing is they're doing some small talk with Jesus. But Jesus knows why they're there. Jesus knows why they want some time with him. He says these words in verse 26. Jesus answered, "Very truly I tell you, you are looking for me not because you saw the signs I performed, but because you ate the loaves and had your fill." Like, there it is. You're here, he says. Not because of the miracles I performed, not because of something I said. You're here because you ate the loaves and you had your fill. You're here because it's the next day and now you're hungry again. You're here for a meal. Like, that's why you're here. No small talk necessary. You're here because you want some food. And as the conversation goes back and forth between Jesus and the crowd, what Jesus wants them to understand, what Jesus needs the crowd to understand, what he challenges them, is to believe in the one that God had sent. He's challenging them to believe in him. And look at their response. So they asked him, "What sign then will you give that we may see it and believe you? What will you do? Our ancestors ate manna in the wilderness, as it is written, he gave them bread from heaven to eat." Like, guys, this is crazy on so many levels. Like, first off, they're like, well, Jesus, what are you going to do? Like, what miracle are you going to do for us so that we know that you are who you say you are? Like, what miracle are you going to do so that we know that you're not just some ordinary dude? Like, what are you going to do, Jesus? And if I was Jesus, let's all be very happy that I'm not Jesus. But if I was Jesus, I'd be like, what do you mean? Like, what am I going to do? Like, I just did something for you. Like, I took a couple fish and 5 loaves of bread. I multiplied it. 5,000 of you ate. Like, that's what I did. What do you mean? What am I going to do for you? But here's where some of this story really starts to hit home. Because we can do this. We can start reading in the Bible. We can start seeing some of these biblical characters, and we can almost chuckle at their lack of faith. We almost chuckle at the way that they just don't seem to understand or to see or to comprehend what God is doing for them, what Jesus is doing for them. We can chuckle at their behavior, but if we take a step back, we can also recognize how often we forget the goodness of what God has done in our lives. Like we'll pray, God, I need you to do this. God, I need you to act in this powerful way. God, I need you to come along. I need you to do this. And God doesn't. We're like, praise God. And then like the next day, we're like, where's God? Like why God is not doing what I need him to do in my life. Like we can find ourselves in this story because we do the same thing. We forget what Jesus has done in our lives. We forget his faithfulness again and again, day after day after day. And seemingly, this crowd has done the same thing. They forgot what Jesus has done for them. So they choose to remind him of how God provided for their ancestors, how God provided manna or bread from heaven for the people of Israel as they wandered in the wilderness for 40 years. And it was in their wandering that they came to experience a hunger and a thirst that they had never experienced before. And it was in that state of desperation that God met them. It was there in their hunger for the people of Israel that God met them. Every morning, all the people of Israel had to do was go out and collect their food. There was no need to hunt for their food, no need to gather the food, no need to prepare the food. It was just sitting there waiting for you day after day after day. You just showed up, took your food for the day, and then went along your journey. There was one caveat to the bread that was being provided by God. And it was this: you could only take the food that you needed for that day. Like you couldn't take food for that day and well maybe for the next day because to come out here it's a little bit of work. So if I got enough hands, why don't I just take food for a couple of days? You couldn't take more food just in case God went on vacation or if God skipped a day. Like you couldn't take more than you needed. And that wasn't accidental. God was very purposeful in that request because he wanted the people of Israel to know that just like God provided for them on that day, God would also take care of tomorrow and the day after that and the day after that. The reason they had to go out every single day was to be reminded of the fact that it was God and not the food that sustained them in life. And this is the history that the crowd is trying to remind Jesus of. God, what you did for our ancestors is what you need to do for us today, Jesus. Yet yesterday you made us full, but today we're hungry. Today we need food. Jesus, what are you going to do about today? How am I going to find my fullness today? God, you have not provided for me today. And Jesus says to them, very truly I tell you, very truly I tell you, it's not Moses who has given you the bread from heaven, but it is my Father who gives you the true bread from heaven. For the bread of God is the bread that comes down from heaven and gives life to the world. Jesus says, look, what your ancestors experienced in the wilderness was only the beginning of what God is doing. What they received was food that sustained them for a day, but what God is doing, what God is bringing through the true bread, what he's bringing through me, is food that will sustain for eternity. More than that, it won't just fill your stomach. The food that God is giving will bring life, he says, life to the whole world. And the crowd's like, I want that. Like that's the bread I want, Jesus. Like I didn't even know that existed, but now that I do, like I can't imagine my life without that bread. Like I want whatever that bread is, that's the bread I want. Maybe it's like grandma's sourdough bread. Like if that's the bread, like I want bread. Maybe it's not that. Maybe it's like a rosemary garlic bread, like something like yummy, just that's the kind of bread I want. Or maybe Maybe it's jalapeno cheese bread, like, ooh, like little spice, that spices up life. Like, that's the bread I want. Like, they're like, whatever it is you're talking about, Jesus, that's what I want in my life. And then Jesus declares, this is where we started. Jesus declares, I am the bread of life. Whoever comes to me will never go hungry, and whoever believes in me will never be thirsty. And the crowd at this point is like, what? Like, human bread? Like that's kind of weird. Like, Jesus, we're not into this whole cannibalism thing. Like, that's not what we're here for. Like, and if you're just offering some sort of spiritual bread, I'm not really interested in what you're selling either. Like, I'm hungry. I think I made this clear, Jesus. I'm hungry, and what I need you to do is to fill my stomach. And therein lies the problem. If we spend our lives chasing fullness, what we will find is there's never enough. If we're just trying to fill our stomachs, if we're just trying to chase fullness in our lives, it will never be enough. We know this. No meal, even the best meal, and if I say right now, just close your eyes and imagine the best meal you've ever had, all of you probably right away have an image of what comes to mind. Even that meal would ultimately leave you longing for what's next, longing for your next meal. This is what the crowd is doing. They're longing for what God is going to do for them next. They want him to do for them as he did for their ancestors. And in their longing, I need you to hear this, in their longing, they revealed their lack of understanding because they believed what God was doing for their ancestors and for them was about food when it had nothing to do with food. Yes, they were hungry. Yes, they needed a meal. Yes, God provided manna in the desert, but it wasn't about the meal. It was about God's provision. If God only cared about feeding them, I kind of said this already. If God only cared about feeding them, he wouldn't ask them to come out every single day to get their food. If that's all he cared about, God would have done something different. The crowd wants to fill their stomachs. Jesus wants to fill their lives. The crowd's there like, Jesus, I'm hungry. I'm hungry. I need you to fill my stomach. And Jesus is like, I don't have any interest in filling your stomach. God doesn't want to just fill your stomach. I want to fill your life. I want to give you the fullness that you're searching for. This story isn't about food. This story is about where we as people turn to find our fullness in. And here's what we know. There's a lot of things in this world that we think we can find fullness in. There's a lot of things that we go searching after, believing, well, this is the thing that will make me full. And like, that doesn't work. I'm like, okay, this is the thing that will make me full. Or it looks different for all of us. We go searching to find fullness in life. We go searching to find fullness in something other than Jesus. And the world tells us there's all these things that should make your life full. And so we go running after them. Let's just talk about a few of them. You know, one of the things we go searching after, one of the things that we think will bring fullness in our lives, work. And so we're going to work hard. Like, we brag about these things. Like, I worked 60 hours this week. It was an 80-hour work week. That's how hard I worked. Like, there's nothing good about that. You realize that no matter how much you work, you still don't find yourself being full. Maybe you complete a work project, you do something, you feel good for a moment, but it's not something that sustains. We go finding fullness in money. Or at least we try to find fullness in money. We got savings accounts and retirement accounts and investment accounts and some Bitcoin off to the side. We got 401ks. And here's the thing. If the balance is big enough, then we feel full enough. But only lasts temporary. So we go look for more. We're going to find fullness in something else. We fill our lives with hobbies. This blew my mind. They do research on anything these days. Anything and everything has someone who's done a doctoral dissertation on it. They've done research on the amount of hobbies people need to have in their lives to have a fulfilling life. You know what the answer is? 3. If you have 3 hobbies, researchers say okay, well, you have what you need to have a fulfilling life. And so we do that. We fill our free time. I'm gonna do this, or I'm gonna ski, or I'm gonna fish for me. And do I take up golf? I don't know. Maybe I need a 3rd one, or I'm never gonna experience a fullness of life without my 3 hobbies. We go searching after fullness in many things. We go searching after fullness in relationships. Well, my future spouse will make me full. My spouse will make me full. My friends will make me full. If I have these things, then I will have the fullness in my life that I seek. Another big one for us is our kids. Culture says, you will have a full life if you raise good, upstanding, citizens. If you raise good kids, life will be full. And so we literally pour all of our lives into our kids, trying to find wholeness and fullness in our kids, only to recognize that it still leaves us longing for more. Last one. We like to find fullness in stuff. If I just have this thing, this is the thing that I need. This is the thing in my life that will make me feel full. We like stuff. I read this week and it blew my mind. The average American household has over 300,000 items in it. Think about that. Right away, people are no, it doesn't. Then you're well, I have 150 toothpicks. You start to calculate. The average home has over 300,000 items in it. So much that we've had to get bigger homes. In the last 30 years, the American-sized home has doubled. We have double the square footage that we did 30 years ago because we have more stuff than fits in our house. So if we get a bigger house, we can put more stuff in it. 1 in 10 Americans have a storage unit. Why do we have storage units? Because we have more stuff than will fit in our home. This is the one that blew my mind. In the United States, we have 3.1% of the world's children. 3.1% of the world's children, yet we consume 40% of the world's toys. We fill our lives with stuff. We fill our lives with relationships. We fill our lives with hobbies, with work, with money. We fill our lives with all of these things, thinking that what we're seeking after, what we're filling our lives with, will bring us fullness, only to find that we find ourselves empty again and again, because deep inside all of us, we are driven by an unquenchable need for more. J.D. Rockefeller was once asked, well, how much money is enough? And again, we're talking about more than just money, but his answer is absolutely perfect. He said, just a little bit more. How much money is enough? Just a little bit more. How much work is enough? Just a little bit more. How much food is enough? Just a little, just that dessert tray. That's all I need. Or how many relationships? Just one more relationship. We are bent to believe that there's something else out there in the world that is going to bring us the fullness that we desire. It's going to satisfy our souls. But we realize, and as we eventually all get there, so I'm trying to save you some of the hassle of having to go down this journey, what we realize is that more is just more. More's just more unless that more is Jesus. And guys, this is what the crowd didn't understand. This is what we need to understand. We need to stop running around chasing after things that we think will bring fullness to our lives and start running after Jesus, recognizing that the fullness that we desire in our lives is only found in Him. I am, he says, the bread of life. And so here's my question for you. Are you willing to give up what you attempt to find fullness in and instead turn to the one whom fullness is found? Like, are you willing to recognize the areas and the ways in your life you've pursued satisfaction and fullness in something of the world, and starting this day, say, you know what, this is not what I pursue anymore. But instead, I will choose to pursue the way of Jesus. I will turn my life to the one whom fullness is found in. Because here's what I've come to realize. This is what many people in this room have come to realize. And if you haven't realized this yet, we want you to realize this. We want to walk this journey with you. Because here's what we know. Nothing else in this world can fill us like Jesus can. And until we surrender our lives to that reality, we will spend the rest of our lives searching, hoping that something else will bring us what we want. We'll be constantly looking for more. And all along, Jesus is right by our side saying, I am all that you need. I started this morning saying, look, this is not about food. Like what Jesus is talking about here is about so much more than food. But at the same time, food has power. And I want to leverage food to help remind us of this reality. And so here's what I want to ask you to do this week. This week, I'm going to ask you to fast. And maybe, like, if you're new to church, like, what is that? It's intentionally going without a meal, without something that we think will bring us fullness in life, and drives us and creates an opportunity for us to turn to the one who can. So this week, I'm going to ask all of us in this room, listening online too, all of us to go without. Maybe that means you skip a meal. Maybe that means you skip 2 meals. Maybe it's you don't eat for a day. Maybe it means you don't eat for 2 days. Whatever you choose, whatever time length you choose to go without food, here's what I want you to do. When the hunger pains come, and they will come, unless you skip like your 3rd snack. When the hunger pains come, and they will come, I want you to sit in the moment and recognize that no matter what you would run to in that moment, no matter what you would grab off your shelf, no matter what you would make, no matter what fast food restaurant you go to, whatever you would try to get to fill those pains, to fill the hunger, would leave you longing for more. And instead, I want you to sit in that moment and be reminded that Jesus is with you. And what he offers you, what he offers me, what he offers us in this life and the life to come is about so much more than just satisfying that need in that moment. And so I want you to turn to him. I want you to spend time with him. I want you to pray to him. I want you to sit in his presence and recognize, even though you're hungry, that he's all you need. That's what I want you to do this week. And the reality is, look, there's going to be temptations to think, well, I don't need to do this. But if you want church to be more than something you just come and listen to, you need to actually begin to put this in practice in your life. So I hope that you do that this week.